thanks ProHarvest, and appreciate being asked again. I must have said something right last year because the time before was like 25 years between speaking engagements. So now it's just 12 months. But, you know, looking at the drone, my dad's been telling me for 2 years, boy, that drone, that's pretty sharp. You got to get one of those for your business. Oh, they're expensive. But I got a client, his son came back to farm lately, and he's a computer software programmer, and he's storm chaser, and anything electronics he likes to do, but he put together an airplane drone and camera on it and playing around with it. In this spring, we saw some corn coming up uneven in the corners and some spots where double application, and the soybeans too, so he started flying. Great practice, take some pictures. So he'd come back, he found you have to take multiple pictures as you go across, and then there's a program that stitches it all together and marks it real world on the computer screen. So through the field north of his house, and we see this big semicircle out across the field where the corn's stunted, not, visually different. So he starts going back in his records of apex and his tillage and then his herbicide applications, brings up a map and just overlays it perfectly. And he fall applied Autumn Super, obviously last November, mapped that as he spread it, rinsed out his tank, mapped that, he drove across the field like that. So that was just the rinse out from his Autumn Super that affected the crop this spring. But it mainly because of the winter. Once he applied it last fall, it froze till what? March? Didn't break down at all. Persisted longer than it's supposed to be. They're all hoping for a 2 or 3 week window with Autumn Super. This became a 6-month application. So unfortunately, I think my dad's right. It's going to be a tool that we can use and help us manage things properly. But typically, in this, what we did last year was kind of review the year, some things that went right, some things that went wrong. Mother Nature kind of beat you up enough times in this area, if not 2, 3, 4 times, so let that be history. Let's talk about some few things. Keith and the sales team have done a good job of putting this list together, that some ideas, some recommendations. You guys do a great job, but it doesn't hurt to have a friendly reminder once in a while. From year to year, we don't always remember everything, so utilize this. They spend a lot of time with it, and there's a lot of good points on there. But let's just focus on a couple of things with corn. Everybody seems to enjoy talking about nitrogen, and then later we'll talk about fungicide. So if we're going to start talking about nitrogen, let's start in a little different place this time. Let's look at the time we go to the field. When that plant emerges, it's going to need 35 to 70 pounds its first 40 days. I've always maintained those recommendations, but I think I'm going to tweak them a little bit because even that's quite a range. And this includes the credit from soybeans. So if we're talking about first-year crop following soybeans, you're going to get some credit from the soybeans. But in addition to that, it's going to need closer to 70 pounds. So instead of 35, we should be looking probably 50 or 60 to 70 pounds in the first 40 days of that life. Now, how we've come to find this out, a lot of our nitrogen was always pre-plant, whether it's spring or fall. But we've seen the benefit of micromanaging nitrogen a little bit more. It's more spoon-feeding the crop. So first transition we did was to adding some nitrogen with the planter or with our herbicide broadcast. And invariably, we'd run out, or they'd run out somewhere on a pass or a through, not head back to fill up, continue out and plant that remainder of the field. And it wasn't long before you saw a visual difference. You'd see a color difference, you'd see a plant height difference. Now that didn't always translate to yield, but if you took a multi-year average, it probably did, because I firmly believe in providing that stress-free, healthful environment to the corn plant throughout the entire growing season. So again, we're going to look at 60 to 70 pounds that first 40 days. Now in a corn-on-corn situation, you got to supplement all that 70 pounds. What happens, we talk about 40 days, that's about the 8 fully emerged leaves. At that time period, you're pretty close to determining your ear size on your corn plant. So if you're stressing it, putting under any type of environmental or nutrient deficient, you're taking the chance of limiting the size of the ears around and the length of the kernels. So, so if we start looking at that in the first 40 days, then the remainder of the nitrogen can go on pre-plant. I don't care if it's fall, I don't care if it's spring. Just guarantee me it's going to be there late in the season. So you say you're using N-Serve in the fall or spring. Now, is that N-Serve working in the fall for you? It shouldn't be. It should be working in the spring only. So now your N-Serve is working, but if it's working too early, you're converted to nitrate and you're susceptible to leaching. Even in the spring, we're seeing it because what's happened the last 5, 6 years? We put our nitrogen on in the fall or spring, here comes the rain. Here comes the rain. We're losing it. We're even losing nitrogen from side dress applications and hydroside side dress applications. Now, how do I know that? Last year, we had growers who were applying 95% of their nitrogen side dress. Applied it the first week of June, end of May, first week of June. Rain set in for the next 2 or 3 weeks. Well, we have access to equipment like that now, the Hagee, with the high clearance Coulter injection. Go back in the poorly drained areas, low-lying fields, put on another 40 pounds of nitrogen, 25 to 26 bushel increase in those spots. So again, doesn't matter in the time of the year, just guarantee me that it's going to be there through that growing season. Now, let's look at some ways we can utilize, make sure all the N is there. I often speak about nutrient balance. For example, soil pH. Now we're still talking about nitrogen. Talk about soil pH over there with soybeans. How's the soil pH affect nitrogen uptake on corn? Well, a low soil pH slows microbial activity in the soil. I'm not getting as much nitrogen supplied from the soil from my organic matter. So if I know I have a low soil pH and I can't correct it, you're going to have to supplement that nitrogen to some effect. So again, low pH affecting nitrogen. Phosphorus. Phosphorus uptake almost mirrors nitrogen. They go hand in hand. Now, as the plant gets taller, more vegetative growth, my demand for nitrogen increases like this. Phosphorus is more linear. But they're almost going hand in hand in the demand. And a deficiency of one affects the other. If I have a low N uptake, my phosphorus uptake is going to be affected, and vice versa. If I have a low phosphorus uptake, I'm not getting all the nitrogen I applied to the soil up into the plant. So again, something that can affect, or you can make a stressful-free environment by nutrient balance. Let's take a look at another nutrient, potassium. Plants cannot optimize their uptake of N without potassium. Good example is this. I'm sure all of you at one time have driven by your cornfields 2 or 3 weeks after pollination. You take a look out there and you go, I didn't put on enough nitrogen. It's firing up. Well, is that really what's happening? I've had severe potassium deficiency in fields. We've gone and over-applied nitrogen and still can't get plenty of nitrogen up in the plant. Potassium acts as a plant growth regulator 2 to 3 weeks past tasseling and extends your nitrogen uptake longer into the season. You know, I often mention some of the corn grower contest winners, and they firmly believe that making potassium available lower in the soil profile makes it available to the crop later in the year, thereby they can utilize nitrogen, utilizing everything they put on later into the season. So again, your pH is affecting your nitrogen uptake, your phosphorus is affecting your nitrogen uptake, and your potassium is affecting your nitrogen uptake. So, think you've run out of N, check your potassium levels. Okay, any comments, questions on nitrogen?
What if you're running out of water? Does that slow down all your nutrient uptake too?
Roots need moisture to grow and take up nutrients. So if you're...
When we look out in the cornfield, we don't know if it's short of water or short of nitrogen.
Yeah, you're correct. You're correct. But
Probably both.
You do need, but other things, you need to control what you can control.
Yeah, okay.
You know, we can't control water everywhere like we can the other nutrients, so.
John, assuming you have great pH and ideal situation, what is there a ratio NP/K that you would suggest? I mean, if you're putting on Is it 5 to 2 to?
Not necessarily a ratio. Let's go backwards. My potassium I base off the CEC, which is cation exchange capacity. It's basically your soil type. Really, it's how much clay content you have in the soil. So the higher your CEC, which these soils out here are going to be anywhere from 18 to 30. I mean, some of these low-lying areas could be just very high CEC. So you have more exchange sites. You're going to need to apply more potassium because they can get attached to those exchange sites and not available to the plant. In fact, you can get so high a CEC that you hear guys make the comment, I've been putting on potash every year, but my soil test just isn't moving. In that scenario, you're better off just feeding the crop. Don't worry about your soil tests. Put on potash a little bit each year ahead of the crop. The closer you can put it on to planting time is the more the better because it doesn't have time to get tied up in the soil. So we talked about this last week. If I could pick one thing out, especially on soybeans, move my potash application all the way around closer to planting time, you'll see your biggest bang for your buck out of anything on this list. So phosphorus on corn, I maintain 40 to 60. Anything below that, I'm building up slowly. But as a ratio, no, I've never really looked at it like that. But something we could take a look at.
What about phosphorus tie-up? Is there any advantage to the avails and the other?
I haven't seen it yet. I've tested it. You want a high concentration of phosphorus in that corn plant. It doesn't take a whole lot. But that if you took a plant tissue test at that time, you want it to show high in phosphorus. It's important to that development of the plant. But your peak demand for phosphorus isn't until grain fill. So it's not going to take much at that. So using the avail, if it's cold and wet, it's cold and wet. You're not going to be taking up much phosphorus. So it's very difficult to overcome that. So I haven't proven it myself into the test yet that avail makes phosphorus more available. So, okay. So moving on, quickly, we're not covering everything on the list, but just a couple major items on there that, as Keith said, we want to increase our production to overcome the low prices, but at the same time, we want to make sound decisions. So next thing I want to talk about is fungicide. And if you want to improve overall plant health, apply fungicide. But does that pay? If you look back at all the tests the last several years, 80% of the time they got a return on applying a fungicide to corn. That average return was 7.4 bushels per acre. Take that times today's price, we're break even, right? Barely. So a little tougher decision to make today at these prices than before. So you want to make sure you're spraying for a reason, not just to make the plant potentially healthier. So for example, we started scouting this year tasseling. Now there's some companies out there that recommend a fungicide at V6. I just don't see much leaf disease present at that stage. And even if you look at their charts, they put out there, see the plant growth, and they're at V6, V5, V6. They're only showing a 5 to 6 bushel return on that application. And again, times today's price, not much incentive to really go out that and do that. So we're scouting at tasseling. We're going out, we're going to see if the disease is present first of all. And we're concerned about gray leaf spot, we're concerned about northern corn leaf blight, and somewhat on rust. So we're going to go out tassel, we're going to see where it's at, and you can usually find it on susceptible varieties, lower on the plant. You might want to take a look at all the varieties. But if you're seeing it low on the plant, first, second, third leaves, check your forecast. If it's warm and humid in the next 5 days, you might want to be back out there and see how it progresses up the plant. If it's cool and dry for the next 5 days, you just gained a week's window to come back and scout it again. You want to protect from the ear leaf up. You can let it move up and down, or up the bottom of the part of the plant. You just don't want it to get above that ear leaf. So again, if it's not present next week, scout again. Your window is tasseling to R2. So that's blister. So tasseling to blister is the most opportune time to spray a fungicide on corn. So R1 silking, R2 is blister, R3 is milk, R4 is dough, R5 is dent, and R6 is black layer. Now you can spray a fungicide all the way up to within 2 weeks of harvest, but your return drops off dramatically once you get past the blister. So you're up here maybe hoping to gain 10 to 15 bushel at tasseling to R2 at blister. Then once you get past that, it falls off quickly. So you better make sure you have disease. You're spraying again for a reason, not just to be spraying to make the plant healthier. So like I mentioned, you want to protect from that ear leaf up. What's your goal? You want to protect as much leaf area as possible from that ear leaf up. Especially this year, like last year, we pollinated all the way out to the tip. We filled out, like some of the ears, Keith just showed it. We're going to need a lot of photosynthetic activity to fill those kernels out. Photosynthesis does what? It triggers a chemical enzyme reaction. It's going to create carbohydrates in the plant. That plant needs carbohydrates to survive, okay? Once grain fill starts, it's going to start moving those carbohydrates into sugars and help fill the ear out. So what happens if we're low on carbohydrates? The plant cannibalizes. Starts to use carbohydrates lower in the stalk as best it can. Now you've just weakened the plant tremendously. So corn production, in my opinion, is all about providing that healthy environment. These are two ways, really, with some subsets that you can help provide that environment. So any questions on fungicide? So again, with the list, you can go through at your leisure. Just want to go over a few of them for soybeans. I'll just pick 7 quick points we can go through pretty rapidly. Select the best genetics. Treat the seed. Plant early. Plant at the proper depth, the proper population. Maintain your potassium levels, which we talked about a little bit earlier. Keep your field clean. And apply a fungicide with an insecticide at R3. So let's go through those a little more in depth. Best genetics, best way I know how is to monitor plots within a 60-mile radius of you. Doesn't have to be right next to your field. You know, pick some similar farming operations, some similar plots that you see. A lot of good plots out there nowadays. Track the top 15% in those plots. You want to compare consistency through all those plots. You want to pick a genetics that shows that consistency. Number 2, treat that seed with insecticide and fungicide. I think Doug talked a little bit about this, didn't you? Get out of the notion that time of year matters. I get that question a lot. I'm going to plant early this year. I'm going to get that seed treated. Or, you know, we've gotten delayed with planting, or I'll probably plant my latter half later. I don't need to treat that with insecticide and fungicide. This year, we had some chemical damage, so we went back in and replanted the field first week of June. I lost the whole low-lying part of the field to Pythium. First week of June. So it doesn't matter on the time of year. It's just the conditions, what pathogens you have out there already to determine that. Number 3, plant early. Well, what's early? Is that March, April? Well, if we think of a normal planting time for soybeans, I always thought it was the first part of May to the middle of May, but I firmly believe now that towards the end of April, 3rd week of April, it's going to benefit you to start planting soybeans. Yield increase are attributed to the concurrence of longer days with critical soybean development stages when soybeans are planted early. When you plant early, you're taking full advantage of the longer days in May and June to create as much vegetative growth as possible. And in a stressful environment you provide, it won't switch early to a reproduction phase. We've all seen soybeans, you know, whether it's on the edge of the field or by the driveway, it gets up about a foot tall and starts throwing flowers out. In a stress situation, it'll transition from vegetative to reproduction, and then that's it. So again, a stress-free environment. Early growth equals nodule formation. That equals nitrogen production for the plant. So again. Number 4, plant deep enough. 1 to 2 inches would be proper. You don't want to get it too shallow in some of the chemicals we're using nowadays, and you don't want to get it too deep to set yourself up for cool, compact soil. Population, 30-inch rows, you're looking at about 135,000 if you're fully treated. You know, if you're only using an insecticide or a fungicide, you're going to have to bump that up a little bit. If you're not using any treatment, you probably should be around 150 to 160,000. So, you know, a little trade-off there in the cost of insecticide and fungicide with the lesser seed rate. 5 was maintain proper potassium levels. I talked about how I base my potassium levels off the CEC of the soil. You know, a sandier soil, low CEC is not going to require as much potassium. because you can, doesn't mean the crop's not going to need it, but you can lose it down through the soil profile because it doesn't attach to anything. So again, we're fertilizing the crop there in those situations. Higher CC like this is going to demand higher potassium levels. Let's see, number 6, keep the field clean, include a residual. You know, when Roundup first came out, we were letting weeds come up and get started and try to kill everything at the same time. And we did. We got a pretty good kill then. But some of those weeds got up shin high, if not taller, and the remnant or skeleton of that plant still affected the soybean. It sensed it was there, and they have the ability to change their branching pattern. If they sense competition, it wasn't competing for water or nutrients, it was competing for sunlight. And it sensed that and changed itself. So, I was talking with Tom earlier, we want to spray early. We want to spray when these weeds are small. We can't take the risk anymore of letting this stuff get tall. It's just too risky. Maybe we can kill it, maybe we can't, but why take that risk at today's market and the cost of the chemicals nowadays? And a fungicide with an insecticide at soybean. Again, I firmly believe that's your best return on investment, is to combine the two. We have two kinds of diseases out there. You have fungal disease and bacterial disease. Fungicide is obviously only going to control a fungal disease. Throwing in an insecticide, we always thought, well, that's going to stop the pod feeding. I'm going to get a better quality out there. But another thing it does with the bacterial disease is the bacterial disease needs an entry point into the plant. So if I can lessen the population of insects, I'm not going to have as many entry points in the soybean plant, so therefore I'm controlling bacterial disease too with that insecticide. So again, it's at an R3 stage, and probably if I compared corn to soybeans, it's been provided a more constant return on beans with the fungicide than corn. So just a few quick pointers, a few reminders. Hopefully take this list with you, use it throughout the year, you know, get it out next spring or each month, refer to it. You know, you guys know a lot. You guys are some of the best innovators, best at what you do, but everyone can use a helpful reminder every now and then. So.